Hey there, y'all. Eric R. Functional Farmhouse coming at you today. Retired master mechanic thoughts number 6. Can you flip cars for profit? I've seen some cool channels lately that I haven't come across that are wildly popular and cool content, good YouTubers, and I kind of went down a rabbit hole with one of these guys that has been buying flood cars in Florida. Now, being in Southern California, it's virtually not a thing for those to come up. And the long story for most of us is you will not turn any measurable profit flipping cars if you're trying to find them. If you can, is it impossible? No. Is it improbable that you're going to make over 10%? Having worked in the shop as long as I did, our shop didn't do it. I know there was a very large body shop down the street from us that the owner would buy wrecked cars, and he would train his body guys on those to keep them for his loaner fleet. And I don't recall him having any real profitability at any scale. And this guy could do body work at his wholesale cost for labor and materials. And they worked on Ferrari. They did high-end stuff. They had the first, oh shoot, what was that Ferrari? Oh gosh, anyway, I'm lost on the models, but it was one of the first in the US, and $1 million car. They did lots of cool stuff. Pretty much out here for regular folks. And here I'm at home. I have a lift. I have tools. Unless you can get a car that is just an absolute stealing from the seller, you're going to have a hard time. If you need any kind of real mechanical work, you're going to get bogged down. If the car is over 15 years old, over 100,000 miles, you're going to start getting into some maintenance stuff. You're going to be doing control arms and bushings and motor mounts, and and especially with a branded title, whether it's a salvage or lemon law, you're gonna, at least in our area, those are auction cars only. People are not chasing down branded title cars. And especially if you're going to go for something like that around here, I wouldn't pay over 50% of what retail is for a fixed one. So there's a kind of a non-starter. And if your car needs any kind of paint and body, unless you own a body shop or you know a guy, it's almost impossible to get any kind of good body work done to do a flip and make any money. Things just cost too much, especially if you start getting into some higher end cars that have some minor damage. My wife had a bumper kiss on our X5 that missed the front inner bumper by about 6 inches. And on the face of it, you're like, that's probably, we got a bumper and something else. It was a $30,000 repair with insurance. It was a 3-mile-an-hour impact, and the amount of parts that it took was staggering. And they used a lot of Copart stuff that wasn't even all new. Doing any European higher end body work is going to get expensive, even buying Copart stuff. And some of these channels, they're spending $100K, $200K on these salvage vehicles. And these channels are sponsored, right? So and I'm not going to say they're not transparent, but I think on some of these builds that they're doing and fixes, they're not being completely honest on the acquisition cost, the holding, and then what the value is afterwards. Going back to the Florida, anywhere on the East Coast that has hurricane damage, if you have a saltwater intrusion. That is a hard stop. That corrosion, it gets in the wiring harnesses. You've got to, if you can do a patch, it is a patch. That car will have problems, and it will be expensive to make right long term. For a YouTube video, great content, y'all. Great content, but people out in the real world aren't buying those, throwing $100 at it and flipping it for near retail as a salvage, especially if you're gonna not be a POS and admit what was going on with the car. You know, so just some thoughts today, because I've been looking for a project car and a replacement for my Ford Focus, and I had in the past a 1986 BMW 325 E30 two-door E model. So it had the lower revving 2.7 straight six. It was an automatic, and that thing was a freaking dog off the line, man. There was a stoplight by my old place that when the AC was on, you had to go full throttle to just barely start rolling, and or turn the AC off to get going. But once that sucker got up to freeway speeds, man, it was a missile. It really drove on the highway well. And of any of the cars I've ever had, I do regret selling that E30, and I didn't have anywhere to keep it. And so I've been looking for one informally on and off here and there. And, you know, a couple years back when I could have picked one up that needed a little work, you could have got one here in Southern California for $1,500 to $4,000, depending on body condition and paint. I was just looking this morning. Absolute basket cases of body and paint are going for 10 to 15, and moderately originals are going for 20 around here. It's absolutely ludicrous. I wouldn't pay more than $5. And those head gaskets are notorious for leaking oil. They have an oil galley for pressure that runs up through the head gasket, and I replaced mine head gasket on my E30, and it needed a second one in my relatively short-term ownership. They need work, and I would love to get one of those and transplant the appropriate age 3.5 liter from the 5 or 6 series. Go to the timing chain, slightly different head situation. Is it carb? Can you get it carb certified? They do not like giving you a higher volume engine in place. So I'm kind of a stickler for that kind of stuff. I do have some other projects. Right now, to replace our Focus, I would love to get a E46 wagon. And again, any of them that have come up are 200,000 miles plus. They need paint and some body. And if they've overheated at all, they could need a head. If they've overheated seriously, those blocks, well, on the steel block they don't, but those cylinder heads are not robust, and 1 or 2 overheats and they warp so bad they're not really repairable. And you know, just trying to find one of those. I mean, I don't want to buy a roached out one that I could reasonably put $4,000 to $5,000 in my cost, no labor, parts to make it reliable. It's just not worth it. It'd be cool, but I don't want to drop 10 grand on something like that right now. Maybe that's the market. Maybe tell me I'm freaking crazy. Maybe that's low. I don't know. And especially if those cars haven't been maintained, those transmissions at 200K are coming to end of life, and they have the lifetime fluid, but you can change it. But that's a lot to take on to start chasing down, you know. And then parts availability, when you're looking at some of these older, cooler cars, if they have model overlap with another comparable, there can be things, but they're a car company. They're out of parts. They're just out of parts. So if you have something and you need it, you will have to find used, and those pools are evaporating at an increasing rate. So car stuff, there are some cool things I would love to do. I just can't stomach buying a clean example like an E39 M5. I've seen some clean ones around here. They're 45 to 65 depending on mileage. Obviously lower mileage, higher price, and they're just not a $65,000 car to me right now. That or a E55 Mercedes wagon or E63 wagon, those are unobtainium. I mean, they're going used for what they retailed. And again, I don't want to buy a 100,000 mile car for $100,000 because they're rare. And then you're looking at the last couple of E63s, not that I'm in the market for it, but the last time I looked, they were like they were in exterior colors I would not buy and own, and they had interior colors. I like dark interior, and they're in the tan and parchment, and I'm just not a fan. I never have been, and I never will be. And so that's one of the things with the auction cars, and if you're looking to flip cars, is you're trying to find the buy low sell high deal, and you don't get to pick. And obviously you're not doing it to keep, you're doing it to sell, so you don't have to be in love with it if the numbers work. But based on what I've seen, and and another thing with doing wholesale, if you're in California doing wholesale, you almost entirely need to have a dealer's license. There are auctions here where you do not, but you're paying cash at the time. And if you're getting in any kind of appreciable vehicle where you're going to be dropping 25 to 40,000, and you don't get to pre-inspect these things, y'all, you're buying them more or less as is. That's a lot of cash for just a dude who doesn't have funding and sponsors to have wrapped up in what could be a basket case in my front yard for an indeterminate amount of time. God help you, you need engine work. Just about anything can be repaired. It's just at what cost. You got some bad oil changes, some sludge, you've got some bearing wash, cam lobe wear. You're getting into big bucks, and you're not going to be profitable on a flip. If you find your dream car and you're going to keep it, that's another story. But I would, if I had the budget and I came across one of those dream vehicles that needed some serious work, and it was the right color, the right condition, the right interior, I might bite that bullet and be into it for more than it was worth. When I had my E46 M3, what did I buy that for? I think I paid out the door private party $21,000, had 65,000 miles, needed the guy who owned it had picked up an M6 from another guy, and he kind of drove the M3 into the ground, so to speak. So it needed tires, it needed maintenance, it needed all sorts of stuff, and I beat this guy up with estimates and facts and things, and so I was able to get it. But in my 5 years of ownership, my out of cost and parts for maintenance, repairs, some OE plus upgrades, and paint, the car had horrific rock and sand blasting from LA traffic. And I'd repainted 2/3 of the car and redone all sorts of, that thing was mint. And I was into it in my parts and the paint for as much as I paid for the car. And it was great. It was a car I wanted and a car I liked to drive. But it was getting long in the tooth for me. It was going to need full Vanos. It's going to need a water pump, a fuel pump, another SMG pump. Those motors, those commutators, high current. And for why they didn't make the motor a replaceable item, I beyond, but that's how they did it. And again, I was looking at another 4,000 to 5,000 in wholesale parts doing OE, and I just got rid of it, and that kid crashed it not a couple days later, or week later. So yeah, the car thing, if it's your passion and you want a project, there's ways to do it. You just got to know that the likelihood of buying cars to flip, especially in Southern California, is difficult. Can it be done? Yes, there are people out there trying to do it. They're trying to buy as low as possible, fix as little as possible, put lipstick on that sucker, and sell it as high as possible. And there are some ethical folks and there are some non-ethical folks. And I've seen enough of these cars doing pre-purchase for our customers wanting to buy. There were cars you could tell before I put the floor mat and seat cover in that this was just not a good fit. And others, they'd done some decent cleanup, but as soon as you got it on the rack and started looking, you could see significant mechanical issues, generally from poor body work and collision work, where like engine blocks are cracked for the motor mounts. These cars have been in significant collisions. And so I've seen a little. It's something I'm not interested in. I don't think, even if I calculate my time, there's no way I would even break even on a lot of these projects I've seen or people have asked me about. And just not something I'm interested. I don't want to do it to break even. That's not a good business model at all. So just some thoughts today. I'm going to keep following some of these channels. They're really entertaining. I like to see them. And there it is, y'all. What are you thinking? You got a dream car? You got a project car? Are you flipping? Let me know in the comments. Let me know what E30s are in your area, because again, I can't see myself spending $10K on an obsolete car to have something cool that I'm gonna put another 10 in for it to be as reliable as I want it to be. So that's me. I know some people buy these things, run them into the ground, leave them on the side of the road, go get another one. So thoughts today. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and we'll see y'all in the next one.